Good evening. I'd like to call the meeting of the Planning Commission to order. And first item is the Pledge of Allegiance. And Senior Planner Dinah, if you could please lead us. Thank you. Thank you. Madam Secretary, can you please call the roll?
Please let the record show that all planning commissioners are present this evening.
Thank you. First item, approval of the prior meeting's minutes. Do we have a motion?
Make a motion to approve the meeting minutes from February 12th.
Second.
Thank you. We have a
Oh, I'm sorry.
that item passes with Commissioner Nelson abstaining due to excused absence last time. Next item, public comments. Do we have speaker slips? Okay. Anyone wishing to address the Planning Commission during the public comment section or on an agenda item is asked to complete a request to speak form available at the door. The completed form is to be submitted to the Planning Commission Secretary prior to an individual being heard by the Planning Commission. Any person wishing to address the Planning Commission on a subject other than those scheduled on the agenda is requested to do so at this time. So if it's on the agenda, you'll do it when we hear that item. In order to conduct a timely meeting, there will be a 3-minute time limit per person and an overall time limit of 15 minutes for the public comments portion of the agenda. State law prohibits the Planning Commission from taking any action on a specific item unless it appears on the posted agenda. So with that, I have a speaker slip from Keith Johannes.
Hello again, Keith Johannes, Dana Point. I missed the last meeting. I came in a little late and public comments was over. I wanted to tell you about the historic tax credit that has been included in the tax proposal that included at the tax passed at the federal government level, offering a 20% tax credit to commercial buildings that are on the National Registry. They can take the 20% tax credit over 5 years. This is only to commercial properties. Historical properties that are residential can apply for the Mills Act and get a tremendous property tax reduction. And it is, depending on how long you live in these homes, or if you're selling, then it can be substantial to the new buyer. So those are incentives that I'd like to make sure that we're all aware of and make sure that when things come before councils that are historic, that we take a look at some of these kinds of things. The second thing I'd like to do is invite you to a webinar that is going to be hosted at the Dana Point Historical Society Museum, which is down in room 104, suite 104. And the title, the date is March 13th, which I think is the day after your next commission meeting. And it is from 12 o'clock noon to 1:30. And it's entitled, Can I Do That? And the subtext on that is Applying the Secretary of Interior Standards for Treatment of Historical Properties. And I think those are the kinds of things that we need to educate our public in terms of what the historical standards are for the National Registry. We'd like to see, the Historical Society is working to get more and more of our historic properties on the National Historic Registry. We have a number of them that are available, but we have none that have applied for that. And everyone's so much afraid of what they can and cannot do. And that's why this webinar on the 13th is so essential, that people have the correct knowledge to explain to them that if they get the right architect and the right construction crews, they can make sure that the property maintains its historic integrity or comes back to that historic integrity so that they can get on the National Registry. So thank you for your time and good luck.
Thank you for bringing those items to our attention. Do we have any other speaker slips, Madam Secretary? No, Chairman. Okay. With that, moving on to the consent calendar. Review of Administrative Coastal Development Permit CDP 17-0027A to permit the demolition of more than 50% of an existing single-family residence and the construction of a new single-story single-family residence. Do we have a staff?
Mr. Chairman.
Oh, sure.
I'd make a motion we move the consent calendar as noted. Be a motion. There's no hearing on this.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah, because it's a consent calendar item, there can be one motion to approve all items on the consent calendar. Happens to be one tonight. We have to ask if anybody has requested to remove the item from the consent calendar. Staff can do that, the public can do that, or one of the commissioners can.
Thank you. Is there anybody that wants to pull the item off the consent calendar? Okay, hearing none, I'm open to, we have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Vote on approval of the consent calendar. And that item passes 5-0. Thank you. Item number 3, Coastal Development Permit CDP 17-0022 to demolish an existing single-family residence and construct a new 3769 square foot single-family residence within the coastal zone and site development permit SDP 17-0042M to allow additional height for retaining walls visible from the public right-of-way located at 32502 Adriatic Drive. Do we have a staff report?
Yes. Senior Planner Belinda Dinas will give the staff report.
Thank you, Ursula. Good evening, Chair McCann, Planning Commissioners, and members of the public. My name is Belinda Dinas, Staff Planner for the proposed project at the Mosnet Residence. This project is before you for review and approval of a coastal development permit because the proposed project involves demolition of the existing single-family residence and construction of a new single-family residence located on property in the coastal zone. The property is not located within the appeals jurisdiction of the California Coastal Commission. Also, a site development permit is required for construction of retaining walls in excess of 30 inches and visible from the public right-of-way. Here's an aerial of the immediate area. The subject site is located in the Monarch Bay Terrace Association community on the inland side of Pacific Coast Highway and accessed from Crown Valley Parkway. The property is developed with an existing two-story 2,509 square foot single-family residence, which will be demolished entirely, and an attached two-car garage that will be expanded in an existing location. The lot is approximately 19,420 square feet in area. The subject property is located in the residential single-family 4 zone and the very high fire hazard severity zone. Here's a photo of the existing structure with the two-car garage on the first story and the entire living area on the second story as viewed from the street. The applicant proposes to construct a new 3,766 square foot single-family dwelling. The overall program consists of two levels, one level of garage and one level of living area with new landscaping and hardscape throughout. Here's a chart showing the site's development standards and how the proposed project is in compliance with these standards for setbacks, height, lot coverage, landscape coverage, and required parking for a house with less than 5 bedrooms. Here is the proposed site plan as it's accessed off of Adriatic Drive. The proposed home consists of 4 bedrooms, which requires a minimum 2-car garage. Highlighted in pink are the setbacks for the site. The first floor includes an oversized 2-car garage internally attached to the upper level with a staircase. The retaining walls within the front setback are proposed greater than 30 inches in height in order to accommodate for entry stairs and the driveway. The second floor includes all of the living area for the house. The exterior is proposed as a soft contemporary style with architectural features that help articulate the structure on all sides. The project involves wall offsets, a variety of exterior finishes, including board and batten siding, stone veneer, standing seam metal roofing, metal doors and windows, and glass elements, all of which contribute to the project's design articulation. The Planning Commission must make the following findings in order to approve the coastal development permit. Staff provides justification in support of the findings as described in the staff report and draft resolution. The proposed improvements meet the development standards of the municipal code and is consistent with the city's general plan. The project is not located within, between the nearest public roadway and the sea, and public coastal access does exist south of the subject site as shown on this aerial map. Furthermore, this project constitutes infill development on an already developed property with no significant environmental impacts with the proposed work. A site development permit is required for construction of new retaining walls that are visible from the right-of-way. Staff has determined that the proposed design of the retaining walls include a landscape strip of 2 feet along the base of each wall with mature plants to visually screen the wall. Furthermore, the walls will be utilizing a variety of materials, stone veneer and metal surface to help break up the mass as viewed from the street. Should be noted also that the existing concrete from the curb to the sidewalk must be removed and replaced with additional landscaping within the public right-of-way in the parkway as a requirement from the Public Works Department. Therefore, the draft resolution further details findings in support of the site development permit. Staff did receive inquiries from neighbors, but they did not express any specific written concerns with the proposed project. Furthermore, the project has been approved by the HOA, the Homeowners Association for the area. Staff recommends approval of the proposed project subject to the findings and conditions in the draft resolution. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have regarding the staff report and the project. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody have questions for staff? You'll get a chance. I have a question. On the retaining wall heights, how much do they exceed the kind of the standard allowable height by?
The height of the retaining walls vary. I believe at the most, which would be the wall for the driveway, is up to 8 feet high in height.
And 30 inches is kind of the standard of what we're...
The threshold without requiring a site development permit.
Right.
And so, as you can see, there are a variety of heights. The applicant intends to step with the topography of the lot to help break up the massing as those stairs go up the slope along the frontage.
Is there a landscape planter in front of that, between the driveway and that 8-foot wall to soften that wall up?
Not on the north side, but on the south side, that there are some retaining, or there are some planter areas there.
Okay. Thank you.
The wall itself, if I may, it does step up along that, so it's not a solid 8-foot.
Okay, it
height.
steps as it goes back.
Correct.
Okay, great. Thank you. Any other questions?
Just one. The existing home has, it looks like 2 retaining walls now. What's the height of the tallest wall now?
Three feet is the existing wall
The tallest wall,
along the frontage.
it looks like from the picture that there's a frontage wall that's white, and then there's landscaping on a second wall, or is that against the house?
If I may I show you
Sure.
and clarify? So this will
one is that one. And then this one here, how tall is that?
That one is 247 to 250, so that's 3 feet.
That's 3 feet, and that's 3 feet. Okay, thanks.
To clarify, based on the topographic survey, both walls are measured at 3 feet in height.
So it looks like you have 3 feet and then another 3 feet, so it looks like 6 foot of walls right now.
Correct.
Thank you.
Is that on the south side?
That is facing the street frontage.
Oh, okay. And I'm seeing, based on this topo, about 4.5 or 5 feet of retaining on the side of the driveway, for what it's worth. Any other questions? And did you say that the HOA has reviewed and approved the plan, the proposed
Correct.
plan? Okay.
The Monarch Bay Terrace Association did approve the plans in September of 2017.
Okay, thank you. So with that, we'll open the public hearing and allow anybody who wishes to speak from the public on this item. Do we have any speaker slips? Thank you. We have 2. Jacob Padilla. Okay.
I'd like to make a correction over here in what was going on with that. The wall at the street is over 5 feet, approximately 5 feet, not 3 feet facing the street. You're saying it's 3 feet, so there's a discrepancy there. I don't know why, or what the planning commission, if that affects anything. So, well, I live next door, and so my concerns are whatever impacts may affect my property. That's why I'm here. So one of the things is I never got notified by the association because we think there really isn't an association to begin with. And number one, we never got notified. Number 2 is I was approached by the owners to sign a common wall agreement, which I'm not going to sign. My wall is on my property. They wanted to pancake on top of it. My wall is only like 4 inches CMU wall. And so the architect said that they were going to put their own wall on their side. And I'm okay with that, but I don't see that on the plan. The other thing is that the story poles in the rear of the property are encroaching the toe of the slope. And I don't know if there's a geotechnical report or anything going on with that. But that would have to be, I'm sure, in retention. It's going to be over 3 feet. Then my other concern was about the pool equipment. Originally, what I had seen over visiting the house from the new owners was the pool equipment was on the west side, and now it's showing it on the east side. And so my concern is the setback, and is there going to be a sound attenuation wall around that equipment? And I know the setback, I don't know, it's 5 or 6 feet, but I wanted to talk to them about it to see if, since they moved it from the west to the east, and it would be more conducive, the way I see it as an engineer myself, to put it in the center. And that would kind of even things out, and the piping would be less and so forth, but that's not any out of my control, right? I want to make sure that they agree with the city to do a swept plan, since there's going to be excavation and over the standard amount in order to put a pool. I'm sure it's going to be at least 10 feet deep. I don't know the quantities, but I'm sure it's going to exceed the minimum amount that would require or flag for a SWEP plan. Also, I'm sure the city has BMPs that they have people comply with, and I haven't seen those. Mechanical equipment, I don't see that on the plans. And I guess at this point, I won't see any of the MEPs, correct?
This isn't interactive.
Oh, it's not? Okay.
No.
Well, that's all I have. Okay,
Thank you very much.
you're welcome.
The next speaker is Ryan Singer.
Can I have permission to approach to deliver this? This is
Why don't you hand it to Madam Secretary and she'll pass it out?
It's basically the frontage. I wanted to address that. That's for what's going to be on the sidewalk.
Thank you.
I know we have to do something, so we're proposing some manzanita, which are drought tolerant, and then also some grasses, which are non-invasive, and DG, some local boulders. Everything's basically local and non-invasive. To address your issues, you were notified because you did come and sign that thing, and that was before.
Can you please speak into the microphone? So we're recording it.
Okay.
We want to be able to hear what you say.
So,
Thank you.
Oh. So yes, we did have a meeting. He did come. He was notified, otherwise he wouldn't have been at that meeting. That was for the HOA. So that addresses that. Yes, the HOA exists. The pool equipment, it does have sound attenuation. We did move it because we did have a issue that we worked out with the other neighbor. We moved it to the other side. It's actually better. There won't be a sound issue because of the methods that we're using. We are close to that hill. We did have a survey, so all these things have been addressed. It's engineered. And then, let's see. That's it. Pretty much it. All I have. There's mechanical, but this is planning, so that's in the house. That's about it. If you have any other questions, I'm here. I can answer.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other speakers who wish to be heard on this item? Okay. With that, we'll close the public hearing and bring it back for council discussion or commission discussion.
Mr. Chairman, I have a couple comments, I think. So I was looking at this topo. My eyes are still pretty good. What it looks like, if I look at the bottom corner of the property, right where the first wall is, that is at 242.3. If you look at the top of curb, just south of that, it's 239. So that looks like a 3 to 4 foot retaining wall. But that second wall steps up quite a bit to another 8 feet. So you have 10 feet of retaining here in that first, at least the way I'm seeing this survey, which seems almost more than what's being proposed currently.
So you're saying that those are existing conditions?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. So you use that picture right now, you can see that white wall that's right up on the city sidewalk.
Right.
That's 2.5 to 3 or 4 feet at least. And then there's that hedge behind it. There's another retaining wall behind that. So if I do the math, it's close to 10 feet right there. I really actually love the design. I think that you've done a really good job designing this house. And the addition of the landscape, that's great. Softening up that edge when we do have a wall that close to the street is critical. So I think that's very appreciated. And it's very consistent with all the homes along the street, at least on this side of the street where they're on the bottom of the slope. I find no reason not to support this. I know that we have water quality requirements, BMPs. Those are a matter of a mandate that has to be done. I assume those are in the conditions that they have to do their WQMP studies and so forth. So for that reason, I would support this project.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Yes, I like the quality of the design, and I think it's compatible with the rest of the neighborhood. I also see that prior to issuance of any grading permits, there will be a geotechnical report, so any concerns about where the poles were encroaching, that will be resolved. The HOA, when they approve it, whether or not they follow their own procedures, that's not an issue that we deal with. And any pool equipment has to be with a certain decibel level, which is demanded by the city and monitored by the city. And it complies with all 7 of the requirements for coastal development permit, and it meets the 4 requirements for a site development permit. So with that and the HOA approval, I'm favorably disposed to the project.
Thank you. Do any of the other commissioners wish to comment? Okay. Well, I'll go ahead and provide comment too. I appreciate the neighbors coming out and raising their concerns. I agree with my fellow commissioners that have spoken that I think it's a beautiful design. I think it's a great design. I think they've done a lot to soften up the retaining walls. I think that as discussed on certain items that your comments or your concerns will be addressed. There are water quality conditions in their requirements. They do have to comply with distance and walling and noise things relative to pool equipment and so forth. So with that, I agree. I can find that it complies with the required findings for the approval, and I will be voting to approve it. With that, I'd make a motion that we approve Coastal Development Permit CDP 17-002 to demolish an existing single-family residence and construct a new 3769 square foot single-family residence within the coastal zone, and site development permit SDP 17-0042M to allow additional height for retaining walls visible from the public right-of-way located at 32502 Adriatic.
Second.
Thank you. That item passes 5-0. Good luck with your client's project. And good luck to you as well. Thank you for coming. Old business, there's no old business. New business, item 4, annual housing element progress report. Do we have a staff report?
Yes, that will be Ms. Dynas again.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ursula. Belinda Dynas, Senior Planner. It is my pleasure to present to you the City of Dana Point's Housing Element Annual Progress Report for 2017. The state requires each city to prepare an annual progress report with the city's status towards implementing its housing element policies and programs. The city's general plan is our community's blueprint for future development that describes Dana Point's development goals and policies, and it contains the very foundation for land use decisions made by our elected officials. Specifically, the housing element is the only chapter of the city's general plan that is subject to substantial oversight and annual reporting from local jurisdictions to the state. In 2013, the City Council adopted the 2014-2021 housing element, which is one of the 7 required elements of the city's general plan. Our Dana Point housing element was reviewed and found in full compliance with statutory requirements as required by California Department of Housing and Community Development, also known as HCD. In 2017, we completed year 4, and we are now entering year 5, halfway into our 8-year cycle. The purpose of the housing element is to identify current and future housing needs for all income groups at all stages of life, and to ensure the preparation of a detailed schedule to meet those needs for our Dana Point residents. The housing element requirement is a fair share housing law, referring to a regional process by which each local community works to accommodate a fair proportion of the region's housing need. This is called the Regional Housing Needs Assessment, or RHNA. Southern California Association of Governments, or SCAG, which is our planning council representing the cities and counties of our metropolitan area, works from state estimates of regional housing need and assign a housing unit goal or allocation to each city and unincorporated county area. This chart shows our Dana Point RHNA and progress in this 8-year cycle, showing income categories relative to the number of housing units built in the first half of our cycle and the total RHNA allocation in each category for Dana Point. To date, during the first half of the cycle, nearly 90% of housing units constructed is for market rate above moderate income. The only 17 moderate income units have been identified, which are primarily the affordable for sale units at South Cove, replacement of existing mobile homes, and second units, now commonly referred to as accessory dwelling units. So halfway into our cycle, we have exceeded our above moderate goals, which is on track for our city's overall housing stock and supply. However, clearly we are not close to our RHNA goals for affordable units. Construction of any substantive number of units in the very low and low income household categories would require innovative application and partnerships of city, county, state, and nonprofit groups to meet these housing allocations. This graphic is to show the table in the last slide in relationship to Dana Point residents' household income. Income is a factor in housing because how much money we have directly correlates with the type of housing we can afford. In the first pie chart, you can see how Dana Point is very diverse when we look at our income categories, extremely low being pink, very low, dark orange, low orange, and moderate yellow. The green area is what we consider above moderate. So into perspective, the average household size in Dana Point is 2 people. For a 2-person family, that means earning more than $84,500 between the two of them. That means the majority of households in Dana Point, 55.7%, make less than above moderate income. The makeup of existing Dana Point residents is reflected in the RHNA goals for this 5th cycle, as shown in the middle pie. The far right shows the units built to date. However, the blue signifies units still needed to achieve the RHNA goals. Green shows we've met our above moderate units. Yellow shows the number of moderate units that have been constructed. Keep in mind that these RHNA numbers are goals, and it is important to note that the city's responsibility is to make sure that we as a city have the appropriate zoning, sites, and opportunities for housing development to occur. The housing element statute requires jurisdictions to address and reduce governmental constraints on the development of housing for all income levels. Such constraints may include local growth controls, strict building codes, developer fees, and permit procedures. Many jurisdictions do take the step further to fund, initiate, or incentivize specific projects that provide assisted housing units. For RHNA, units are counted when the applicant is issued a building permit from the city. In 2017, the city anticipated we would see a higher number of building permits issued compared to years past in this cycle. A total of 68 units were issued permits. 6 were moderate income for sale condo units, and 2 were accessory dwelling units. We are reporting construction of the condominium units at South Cove, new custom homes at the Strand at Headlands, the triplex units at Grand Monarch, and other infill sites on single-family and duplex properties. While our city's housing element has been certified from the state, the element itself provides resources and policies necessary to meet the community's housing needs. We have an approved implementation plan with a schedule of programs that includes specific actions to remove governmental constraints to the maintenance, improvement, and development of housing. The staff report provides analysis of progress in Table C, and there are programs and approved policies that we as a city can promote to encourage mindful development of housing. Density bonus, accessory dwelling units are state mandates that were revised in the state legislature in 2016. Fee reductions and waivers, specifically, this is an item that will be reviewed reviewed by the City Council in the near future. The program recommends fee reductions and waivers as an incentive for future projects. Another program that's not specifically identified in the element is the city's homeless task force. This program has been successful working with Mercy House to identify local strategies, and the task force will continue its efforts. Staff continues to monitor the development of 17 for-sale affordable housing condominium units at South Cove, and we are working with the developer in compliance with the executed affordable housing agreement. Income-qualified buyers are being selected through a lottery and screening process, and the next drawing will take place in fall of 2018. There are no additional assisted units that are at risk for conversion. 2017 was the year of housing, which culminated in the passage of California's housing package. A total of 15 statewide housing bills were passed for additional funding, streamlining, and accountability in support of affordable housing. The major components of this legislative package are to provide critical funding, accelerate development to increase housing supply, hold cities accountable for addressing housing needs, and to create opportunities for new and preservation of existing affordable homes. Lastly, in December of 2017, the city adopted a revised accessory dwelling unit ordinance in compliance with statutory mandates intended to encourage the development of small-scale residential units as infill in our existing residential neighborhoods, also known as ADUs, granny flats, in-law units, second units, and tiny homes. The intent is to increase available housing stock. These ADUs may be rented out for more than 30 days, so homeowners can consider the income potential. An ADU could also be a detached structure not to exceed 50% of the existing house with a maximum of 1,200 square feet. An ADU could also involve sectioning off an area of the home into a separate unit with a second kitchen and bathroom. This use is permitted in all residential zones but must meet the state development standards for ADUs. These units are considered incidental and accessory to the main residence, which technically does not count towards required density. There are specific submittal requirements involving plan check to meet building code requirements, and city staff welcomes inquiries from property owners about the ADU process. Also, last year, staff had met with the Architectural Guild of South Orange County to further promote the development of ADUs. ADUs are considered affordable by design and qualify as moderate income towards our RHNA allocation. The City Council will also receive this report on March 20th. The report itself will be then sent to California HCD as well as the Office of Planning and Research due to the state by April 1st. In conclusion, it's recommended that the Planning Commission provide comments and receive and file the annual housing element progress report for 2017. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions?
Yes. In South Cove, there's affordable housing, and we have a certain number of units that are going to come online. Is there any process that that allows us to maintain control of that so that you don't lose your affordable housing over time?
Yes, there is. And so there are a total of 17 units. Each, even though they are for sale units, each property owner is required to comply with the affordability requirements of those covenants, and that will be in perpetuity of the project. And so whenever there is a resale of the proposed units, the city will be required to verify that any proposed buyer also meets the eligibility for income. And that is moderate income.
If I may add, so that each property owner will be required to enter into an affordable housing agreement, and the properties will be deed restricted. So there will be a covenant recorded on the property that it is restricted in perpetuity as affordable.
We didn't do that before.
I believe that was the county who did not do that before. Yeah.
Yes, I do have a question. In the very last section, the very last page, just right above conclusion, under category number 6, having to do with the Monarch Coast Apartments. I guess we don't have enough information. What is the status of that right now in terms of being able to use these apartments?
So those apartments have lapsed their agreement. There are, I believe, 84 units that had been previously identified as very low and low income rents. And as of 2015, that agreement has since lapsed, and so they have converted to market rate.
So if I may, they were, I believe, recorded for 30 years. So they remained, there was a 30-year covenant, and at 30 years, they were eligible to convert over to market rate.
Okay, but the fact that there's an indication here that the developer had difficulty securing financing for construction, did that, what impact is that?
So there was a landslide, so that's where those units were lost to the landslide. And so the units were lost during that 30-year period. The 30 years came, so that agreement expired, so there's no leverage to continue to require them to be affordable, and they are now trying to rebuild those, but they're having trouble attracting investment due to the high costs associated with the geotechnical conditions. There's caissons, it's very expensive, and so they are still trying to build those units, but they're having a hard time with the financing.
Okay, I see, thank you.
I have a whole bunch of questions, so bear with me here. I got noticed by HCED, so I was on the policy committee last year with the league and sat through hours of housing bill information stuff. And and as part of that, Prop 35, they sent out a status memo the other day. I don't know if you got copied on it, notifying that the city is, amongst almost every other city in the state, doesn't meet the requirements, and they're under the Prop 35 bill. A developer could come in, propose a project that meets the city zoning, and there's nothing we can do to stop it, basically. And on top of that, they could apply for density bonuses. And so is that accurate?
Correct. If I could expand on SB 35. And so as of a couple weeks ago, we were issued the maps that were released, and Dana Point specifically is under a different threshold than other jurisdictions. We actually have a threshold of 50% of affordable housing versus 10% in other jurisdictions, where they would be subject to the streamlining provisions of expediting review. Another factor that we would need to take into account is the fact that some of our city is located in the coastal zone, and so it is not necessarily applicable to areas in the coastal zone. So keeping that in mind, that the streamlining package would be subject to any projects that are proposing more than 50% of affordable housing units.
And is that, just sorry to interrupt, but that was
Sure.
on the very low, right? So they didn't, it isn't just moderate, it'd have to be a higher threshold for them to be able to do that?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. And so in order to utilize the streamlining approval process, they would have to be more than 50%.
Okay, good.
And it is tied to the fact that we have actually met more than 50% of our above moderate arena numbers. So because we're building units, that we're in a better standing than other jurisdictions.
Gotcha. Okay, great, thank you. Okay, and then the next question is, we do these reports, this whole cycle happens, and then, if you just do the math, it's pretty clear we're going to miss the mark. What does it mean to our city as a city, knowing that, is there anything we do as a city, or is it just, you basically plan for it, put the tools in place, and then you obviously don't build the houses, so your hands are somewhat tied?
Absolutely. And so within the cycle and with the passage of this housing package, we do need to consider how we will accommodate for those units and adjust accordingly. There are monitoring requirements from here on out, and specifically this process that we're doing today, it will change next year as well and become more substantive in terms of the reporting requirements that will be needed. So anticipate that next year we'll actually have a more robust report because of what had been approved in the housing package. And so we'll need to keep that in mind in terms of the rest of our planning for the rest of the cycle, but we'll also keep that in mind for the next cycle coming up in 2021 as well.
And if I may add, this report goes to the city council after it goes to you, and we will be reminding them of that as well. And really, as part of the work plan that they create, as part of the strategic planning effort that they're going through, we need to remind them that in terms of housing policy, it needs to be at the front. It'll be up to them to give us direction on that, but we will definitely make them aware that we have these numbers that we need to be striving to meet.
Right, okay. Because if I do them, we lost units with the landslide. We actually went down in our affordability over the past term of this thing. And then on the ADUs, just so I understand, what are they classified as? What level are those classified at?
So we're considering them moderate income because they are affordable by design. They are smaller scale. And so we haven't had any pushback from HCD about counting them towards a moderate income. But we are not deed restricting them to affordability.
Okay. And I'm not sure if you can even answer this question. Do we have any housing fund? Do we have any money to participate in a project with an affordable developer?
We do. Ursula?
It's a small amount, but
Nothing
there's,
substantial.
correct.
And then the last is on the 17 that are being built down in South Cove. Those came from because of the Coastal Commission?
I believe so, as a result of Mellow Act requirements, 10%.
Okay, because we don't have a requirement.
We do not have
City,
inclusionary housing requirements.
All right, that was it. Thank you very much.
Any other questions? Unfortunately, I have a few. I will try
I'm
and be.
sorry, I do. I apologize when you're done.
Is your question, will I please be brief?
It'll be brief.
No, is your question to me, will I please be brief? Will
No,
I
I
be
just
brief?
need to have.
Go ahead, go ahead.
So there was the one permanent shelter that was approved earlier this year, or not approved, but the bonds were approved for it. It's mentioned in the report, but there's a note that we don't get credit for it.
Correct.
Were these already
And so-
considered affordable?
The project that came before City Council, it is a 17-unit apartment complex that was market rate that has been rehabilitated to accommodate permanent supportive housing for extremely low-income residents. And it is run by Friendship Shelter, a local nonprofit agency. And because it's very specific in the government code as to whether or not it can qualify towards the table, I believe, A2, that the city would have to contribute funds to make sure that that's deed restricted for extremely low income in order for it to qualify.
Okay, so is it so I just want to make sure I understand this, because the units have been provided. We can't report it because there's no deed restriction mandating it.
Correct.
That's why it's not being, okay.
Correct.
Okay, that makes sense. That was it.
Thank you. And I don't feel, just a quick answer is fine. I don't need a big explanation on these. How is the threshold of 84,000 determined? Is that based on percentages relative to the local income of this area, or is it from some bigger calc from Orange County or something?
It is the state income limits are prepared every year by the state, and it is specific to Orange County.
Okay, but not specific to Dana Point and Coastal?
It is not.
Okay. What would someone who was making the maximum, the 84,000, let's say 499, and let's say they put 10% down on a house, do you know how much loan they could qualify for? Like what house could that afford?
Oh, I wouldn't be able to.
It depends on interest rates. So it's a variable situation. So the interest rate plays a really large factor into what you can afford.
Sure, okay. Okay, that makes sense. Who selected the RENA goals? Did we self-impose them, or were they kind of mandated based on some bigger calculation by state rules?
It is calculated and distributed by SCAG, which is our regional
Right.
authority. And so generally, for the most part, when we look at those goals, it is consistent with the income demographic. And actually, I believe there's a process that occurs where we would need to show whether or not there's growth occurring, and there's a conversation that occurs as well. So there's a process to determine the number of units that are allocated.
Okay, thank you. You said something about basically if we're not hitting goals, it sounded like I heard that there might be more monetary contribution required, something to that effect.
Correct.
Where would that money come from?
So, for example, one of the housing bills actually has a penalty. So if a city, for example, denies an affordable housing project and the state finds that there isn't sufficient grounds for the denial, they can fine the city $10,000 per unit, that sort of thing. And that was approved in the housing package. So there are kind of ramifications for not allowing affordable housing to be built if there isn't adequate justification for denial.
Okay, but there's not a imposed surcharge on other above moderate units that are pulling building permits?
No.
Okay. Why were ADUs designated as moderate? I mean, it seems to me if someone's renting a little tiny, 100 square foot place, that could easily potentially be a very low income or a low income person. Moderate seems kind of higher than it might really be.
You'd be surprised how much they actually go for, and so like a 600 square foot unit will probably rent for about $1,800.
Okay, but the photos that were provided were not 600 square foot units.
And that's not here. That's just kind of a,
Okay.
yeah. What we've seen in recent submittals is often conversion of a lower level into a second unit so that it's actually integrated as part of the structure. Some are detached, attached, so it varies, but there is a minimum size requirement and maximum size requirement as well.
And so if I may, back to Commissioner Nelson's question about why we couldn't count the 17 unit, and it was because they were not deed restriction. So at the end of the day, that's the same reason why we can't count the ADUs. Unless we deed restrict them as low income or very low income, we can't count them. And that is a pretty onerous process. It would probably make a lot of folks not do the ADUs. So I think that the state is happy with them being moderate, at least increasing some dwelling units and living with that because I think a lot of people wouldn't do it if they had to do the deed restriction and income qualify people. We've actually hired a consultant to help us do that. The developer's paying for the consultant. It's a pretty onerous process.
Okay, thank you. And then lastly, I think the city is to be congratulated for, in fact, providing a certain number of housing units and kind of on track to meet RENA goals relative to total number. They might not be category specific, but yet we are providing, there is new housing being built, new housing stock, it's gotten approved, and it's moving forward. So I think that given the constraints that we have here in Dana Point, I think that's fantastic. So I think we should not view this as negative, but in fact, we're doing a lot of good things. That concludes my comments. Are there any other comments?
I just have one. Is there any, feedback, if we're talking about 88,000 is the median income for Orange County, but then the property values would vary dramatically between the various municipalities. So to take that number and then apply it across all of Orange County, is there any recourse?
No, so they look at income. So whether you are in, Lake Forest or Dana Point or Newport Beach or Lake Elsinore, the income is whatever it is. It's what the person makes. And that's what they look at. And in terms of coming up with the median, it's just the way you would come up with median home prices, median income. It's the middle point of the high income and the low income. So it's the median for Orange County.
I understand that, but my question was, what you can afford for $88,000 would be different in Dana Point than it would be in...
Not really. So the median, so there is $300,000 in Dana Point is the same as, yes, I agree, you could get a $300,000 house in Lake Elsinore, but that is still only low income or median income countywide.
Yeah, a $300,000 house in Dana Point costs $1 million.
Okay, well, it sounds like we're ready to receive and file. Does that sound right? Okay.
I would make a motion, but I want to make a comment first. I agree with Mr. Chair with your comment about the city doing a good job. And I think, we're in a situation where we have the state pounded on the cities. They're penalizing them to do certain things they have no control over. They've taken away all the money that we used to have with redevelopment going away. And then, this instance, we have a private development come in. They essentially rebuild this apartment complex, and we don't get credit for any of that. The system is messed up. The system's broke. And what's happening in Sacramento is they're adding regulations in an attempt to make things affordable, which to me makes no sense. It's hard to add rules and regulations that would reduce costs. And my guess is if cities are getting penalized, then those costs go somewhere. So I think we have to do these reports. It's well done. I think we should make us think about the very low, the fact that it's not deed restricted. How do we ask a private investment person to come in with a project that normally would have to be wholly subsidized, do it out of their own back pocket, and then expect some kind of deed restriction to get credit for it? We should, I don't know how we deal with that with HCED, but we should at least argue that, there's some monitoring that has to go on with those bonds, I would imagine, and in there is a way to track it, and you take it off when it goes away. But we should encourage private investment as part of a housing element. And if there's someone that wants to do a project like that, we should welcome them in, and we should also get credit for it. So that's kind of my overarching comment. But I would make a motion that we receive and file the report at this point.
A second.
Okay, before we vote, I wasn't going to editorialize, but I'll do a 20-second editorial, which I wholeheartedly agree. The whole thing is completely messed up. And I was sitting here thinking about micro units and what about construction defect litigation. If the state could, I'm being recorded, so I'll keep my tongue in my mouth, but do something to, make things more buildable and pensable and get rid of certain construction defect litigation and things like that, then maybe there would be a chance that some real progress could be made. So I'll get off my high horse and we can vote. And we will be receiving and filing, I see. That item passes. Staff reports?
So yes, I do have a few. One, I wanted to mention that we have new counter hours. So the counter is now open from 7:30 to 3:30 every day, and then by appointment only after 3:30. And we have done, under Shayna's brilliant communication plan, we have actually done a reverse 911 to all of our applicants, so they're receiving text message as well as voicemail messages. We have signage on the door. There's a new keypad or iPads that you kind of check in now, and we have a pop-up screen there. Our voice messages out to the public remind people of the new hours. So there's been a big communication effort, and it was about a 3-week advance period. So those start March 1st, those new hours. We think that it actually provides customers with big applications, if they come in and make an appointment after 3:30, a better customer experience where they're not sitting in long lines behind people getting water permit, heater, etc. Festival of Whales starts this weekend. The parade is Saturday at 10 a.m. The City Council is having their third strategic planning session on the 28th at 8:30. at the Ocean Institute. Those are open to the public. We're not really getting too many people attending, but I wanted to let you know. And then I did want to take the opportunity quickly, since Mr. Johannes is still here in the crowd, to talk about the historic tax credits. I have a little bit of experience in past jurisdictions, but there was a recommendation from the Historical Society to talk about the Seaside Inn property, which is in receivership. And the receiver's actually been very open to looking into the historic tax credits. And I participated in a conference call with the National Development Council. They're one of the oldest community development nonprofits in the country, and they are one of the largest issuers of tax credits. So whether they are historic, new market, affordable housing, public-private partnerships, and it will be a little bit difficult. So generally, it's really folks with high tax liability, big corporations and banks. Those are the ones who take advantage of the tax credits. So they'll partner with a local owner, and there'll be a new entity formed, but they're really the ones who are taking advantage of the tax credits. And generally, if the project doesn't generate at least $1 million worth of tax credits, it becomes very difficult to make the deal go through. So in terms of Seaside Inn, it was the project's not going to generate that much in tax credits, so it will be difficult. So it's generally kind of larger scale projects that can take advantage of it. But we will continue to look for opportunities. Thank you.
Thank you. Can you elaborate just briefly on that strategic planning session with the City Council? What's that regarding?
A consultant has been hired to facilitate some strategic planning sessions, and it's for the first couple of meetings are really focused on kind of vision, mission, and values, and the strategic initiatives are coming next, and the consultant has recommended really about, no more than 4 or 5 strategic initiatives. It's kind of like if you have too many priorities, you don't really have any priorities, and this will be a way for staff and for the council to help manage kind of what staff is working on underneath those initiatives. So on the 28th, they are meeting at the Ocean Institute at 8:30 in the morning.
How long is that expected to last? I mean, is it like an all-day thing, or?
They usually go till noon. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, they're really working sessions, and so the public can watch. There's a little opportunity for public comment at the beginning, just like any noticed meeting, but it's really a working session for the council.
Okay. Thank you. Commissioner comments? Anybody have anything they want to share?
I do. I took a walk down yesterday to the La Plaza and saw some pretty wonderful old surfboards and old records and old people. No, that would be me. No, that was me. It was really fun, and I learned something. My dad used to tell stories about how when he was a lifeguard in Long Beach for many, many years, because he lived near Long Beach, is how he put himself through college and stuff. And he used to talk about these really tall wooden surfboards. And of course, got no clue what he's talking about, because we didn't, we had better things for our generation. But it was fun because they had some. And it was amazing. These things, they just go to the ceiling, but they're just so extraordinary to see something like that. These surfboards are still with us. These old wooden surfboards. So it was great fun. It was, and I saw the Ocean Institute was there, and they had little areas for the kids to kind of do hands-on stuff. So it was fun. Very much fun. I enjoyed it.
Great, thank you. Any other commissioner comments? With that, I will adjourn the meeting to the next regular meeting of the Planning Commission will be held on Monday, March 12th, beginning at 6 p.m. in City Council chambers. Thank you.
Thank you.